Welcome, everyone. I am so excited for our guest today. This is somebody that I have actually known for quite a while, and we met back in my higher ed days. And I'm excited to have her here because she has made a pretty big transition, and I'm excited to talk about it. My guest today is Jade Chan, and she is currently the Diversity and Inclusion Program Manager at Amazon Web Services. She also happens to be a motivational speaker and leadership coach. So if that's something that you're looking for, then you definitely want to check her out. And I will leave all of her contact information in the show notes for you if you're interested. But one of the things that I want to mention about her career, which she is still fairly early on in her career, but she has had over 15 roles in several different industries, including tech, startups, education, nonprofit, and corporate America. And let me tell you, I know her background. These were intentional choices that she made to have experiences in a lot of different areas and a lot of different industries. So I'm really excited to have her here to share about her current role at Amazon, as well as things that she has learned throughout her journey. So welcome, Jade. I'm so happy that you're here joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to speak on your podcast. It's a huge pleasure and honor. And I also want to thank our listeners. And Julia, I love your content. You are an expert in career advancement. And so I'm really excited to provide as much value as possible for your listeners today. And my hope is that my story can help inspire at least one person to take action to advance their career, make a career leap, and get started.
Yes, I love that. And you guys, I did not tell her to say any of that. She chose to say that. So thank you so much. This is why I'm excited that you're here, because you are just as passionate about helping people take action as I am. So one of the first questions that I want to ask, because you are in D&I, which is diversity and inclusion, and that area has become a shining beacon right now with everything going on in the world. A lot of organizations are really ramping up their D&I work, and we'll refer to it as D&I because it's just an easier way to talk about it. But I would love for you to share a little bit about what that means in your role.
Yeah, thanks for that question to kick us off. So as Julia mentioned, I have the honor to serve as the Diversity and Inclusion Program Manager at AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. Now, at Amazon, we have a strict policy where we can't go into details about what we do. And so I'm going to share a little in general about what diversity, equity, and inclusion work is about. And so my career path has always had the theme of being about inclusion and equity ever since I was a youth activist in my community. And so a couple of things about diversity and inclusion work is, one, you have to be able to create empathy experiences for groups of people, for individuals, and for organizations. So you have to have three different tiers. You have to be able to work one-on-one with people to help them understand how to build that empathy muscle so that they can, because everybody has their own lens and their own life experience, right? And so you have to be able to help the leader or the employee be able to understand what are the perspectives of underrepresented talent in their organization, what are the life experiences, and how does that impact them on a day-to-day basis in and out of their lives and in the workplace. And then you can do that in a couple of different ways. You have to be able to facilitate team building experiences, large-scale events for large organizations so that you can highlight the marginalized voices that often do not get a platform to speak. And then second, it's a huge honor to do my work because one of the things is I am able to influence people and work with folks like HR, recruiting, or leaders, employees to help remove barriers to talent management systems. So what I mean by talent management systems is oftentimes there are so many layers that prevent a workplace from being able to keep, attract, engage, develop, and keep underrepresented talent, right? So we want to be able to advance and attract and keep these underrepresented talent because a diverse workforce is going to be able to help us build better products, help us make more money, and help us build a better culture where people are motivated. So, so removing barriers would be like looking at your job description, looking at the culture in your teams, looking at your hiring questions, all of those aspects. And then I'll talk about 2 more points before we move on to the next question. So one of them is you have to be able to change the culture in your organization. Look at where you are now, because everyone wants a sense of belonging. There's this saying that people don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? And if managers are all about an execution style, then people are not going to want to stay in that team or organization because people want to belong at work. They want to know that they have friends at work. They want to be able to enjoy their work beyond just executing to the task. And to be a manager, it's a huge honor. You have to love it. And you have to be able to help people feel included, people that don't look like you. Because, and the last thing is representation matters, right? And we know this. We know that representation matters. You can't do something if you don't see someone that looks like you. You can't even dream that it's possible. So if we don't see leaders that are leading Fortune 500 companies or in management positions that look like us, then a lot of people are not going to believe that they're able to do that. So it's finding ways to amplify underrepresented talent voices. I hope that gives a great overview, Julia.
Yes, that was amazing.
Awesome.
Okay, I hope our listeners really heard that and understood, because Jade, what you did was you gave such a simple and easy to understand overview of what diversity and inclusion is supposed to look like in an organization. And I think that was such a great explanation. I think that's going to help people who are not naturally inclined to this work or who have never been exposed to it and they hear it, they're hearing it being thrown around at their organization, but they don't know what to do with it, because I think a lot of organizations right now, as we've been seeing throughout 2020, they're just dipping their toe in the water of what D&I actually means and what it looks like at their organization. So I think you're seeing a lot of documents being thrown around and a lot of statements being made, but to understand what action looks like, you just articulated that so well. And one thing I want to
That was the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah, I know. I know. I am also very passionate about D&I work. So that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on, because I think people need to understand from just a functional standpoint, what is this work and what does it mean? And one thing I want to touch on that you said, one of the first things that you said was the empathy piece. And I think for individuals who are listening right now, that is one of the main pieces that all of us can control first, is our level of empathy around the people that we work with and are in community with, all of that. And so I'm so glad that you talked about that, because I think 2020 and everything that has gone on with the pandemic has given quite a few people a different level of empathy than they're used to having, because we were all in the same situation. We were all in the same boat. But then as time goes on, sometimes we forget right? Like that empathy
Absolutely.
can drop off. So I'm really thankful that you were able to come on and just even share that piece, because I think that is something we can all control first, is how we're reacting and how we're seeing a situation, how we're perceiving something. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's great.
Absolutely. I'm just going to give one final note to follow up on what you said. It's really about making sure that diversity, equity, inclusion is a movement and not just a moment.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I think too, as much as the leadership needs to be involved in that, in driving that vision, the employees on the ground too are the ones that are living it day to day. And so when you can step in and you can support and you can be an ally and you can really help bring a voice to that type of equity, I think that's what we can do at that ground level.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, so I want to get a little bit more into your career story and some of your transitions. So can you talk to me about a couple of poignant transitions that you have had in your career that got you to AWS? Because you're coming from a totally different industry. So I'm really interested to hear about what some of your key transitions were in your career at this point.
Great question, Julia. So I'm going to be talking about a couple major transformations, but I really want to start with my roots and my why, because I think it's really important for my listeners, your listeners.
They're going to be your listeners because people are going to hire you.
Thank you. So I want to start with my roots because I think people have a certain misconception of what it takes, that I need to have a certain background to get into working in corporate or to get into working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I will say one of the most powerful experiences is your own personal lived experiences. So I grew up in East Los Angeles in a place called Lincoln Heights. And Lincoln Heights was amazing in terms of we had so many resilient immigrant communities, a lot of amazing immigrant parents that immigrated here to give their children a better life. It is a predominantly Mexican community and Latinx community. And so I grew up around a lot of rich culture. Now, I love Lincoln Heights, but I also grew up under a lot of racism and a lot of poverty. So almost on a weekly and monthly basis, I would be bullied for the color of my skin, for my eyes, or for being poor. My mom, she would buy me shoes that were 3 sizes too big, and I would fail physical education class because I couldn't run in them because they were so big. And I would get bullied because I couldn't afford extra pairs of uniform and switch out of them. And one of my earliest memories was being in a park. I was in a park. I was about, I think, 7 years old. I just wanted to play. And I was surrounded by about 15 Latinx kids. And these 15 kids, I wanted to play with them. And I thought they wanted to play with me. But instead, they surrounded me, they started staring at me, and they started spitting at me. And they followed me around the park for probably about 30 minutes. And I just wanted to play, but they kept spitting at me. And just, I remember the way that they looked at me. It was with hate and mockery. And in that moment, I learned that I was different. I learned that I was different, and it was because of the color of my skin and for my eyes. And these were kids, not adults, that were picking on me. In that moment, what that experience taught me was that being Asian American was not beautiful. It wasn't being seen as beautiful. And so imagine a lot of people, they feel this type of bias. They feel this type of aggression all the time where they're shamed for one of their identities. And so growing up, that definitely influenced me, and it influenced a lot of different kids who are people of color, who are kids of color. And I could have let that experience turn into hate, right? And hate is a very motivate. It can motivate people to produce more hate and anger, right? But instead, I let that turn into empathy, love, and strength. So I started getting involved as a youth activist in my community in Lincoln Heights. I was very grateful because I had two mentors, Mexican American and Vietnamese American mentor. So Dennis and Trin Ortega of LHTP, Lincoln Heights Tutorial Program, shout out.
Yes.
They're still doing amazing work, and you can donate to them. But
I will link that organization in our show notes as well if that's something that you want to learn more about. So we'll hook you up there. I'm going to cut in really quick because I have known you for many years and I did not know that story. And I'm sitting here like literally trying to hold back tears. So for those of you that might be watching the video, you could probably see my eyes like start to get bloodshot. That I can't like listening to it. I can't even express to you how what I don't even have words.
Julia, anyone listening, and I know you have kids, right? You don't want that for your kid.
No. And I especially don't want my kid to be the person that is, the aggressor in that situation. And my heart just goes out to like the 7-year-old you, because that type of experience, those are the things, as you were saying, that really shape us as we go into adulthood. And I am so sorry that you had to go through that in your life. That is, I hate hearing stories like that. It hurts my heart, but I am so thankful that you are comfortable enough sharing that, because I think it's so important for people to hear that and to hear where you have been and where you are now, and your transition getting there is absolutely inspiring. And I'm so happy you're here talking about this.
Thank you, Julia.
Okay, I'm not going to interrupt anymore. Go ahead, keep telling your story.
Oh, you're fine, and feel free to interject. I think that it's important. This is a back and forth conversation, right? Yes. And Julia, even I feel comfortable sharing about my experience now because I knew that I have turned that experience into a strength. But I want to emphasize that my experience is not unique in that, because there are kids every single day that go through that are bullied for their race or for the color of their skin, and even employees, adults. Right. Yes. And so whoever is listening in, just think about that. Have a conversation early on with your kids about race. So I'm going to go back to the question. So the question was about a couple of very transformative things that happened in my career. So that was one, right? Because because of those experiences, it made me want to make my neighborhood a better place, my world a better place. So it made me become very motivated. So I became a youth activist in my community with the encouragement of Dennis and Trin Ortega, and also the encouragement of my amazing, amazing mom. And so I became a youth activist, and I helped bridge Asian and Latino youth in the community, so that instead of hate, we would come together, we would do volunteering events, we would raise money so that we could go on college road trips. As we were learning about college, then we were helping other students learn about college so that we can go on to college and build generational wealth so that our kids can have a future where they have more opportunity. And so it's all about giving back. Now, the second transformational experience I'm going to share is fast forward. Fast forward to 3 years ago, from 7-year-old Jade to 3 years ago. So I think one of the biggest hurdles to break into diversity, equity, and inclusion work in the business and any space, the business, tech, education, etc. One of the biggest hurdle for people is they don't believe that they can make the transition. A lot of people, they want to go from education or nonprofit into D&I work in government sector, tech sector, business sector. And they don't believe that they can do it. And that was one of my biggest hurdle was my inner conflict. I was at a crossroads where I thought that I had to choose between money and my passion. And the reason that I had that conflict was because in nonprofit and education space, you are taught that wanting to provide for yourself, wanting more money to provide for your family is a bad thing. And a lot of times they'll make you believe that corporations are evil, etc. But it took me a long time to unlearn that toxic mindset, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Where I learned I don't have to choose between passion and money. You can have both. You can have both of those at the same time. And for a long time, I blamed the system. I was like, wow, I've been working in this field. I've had over 10 positions in this education field, but yet I don't even have the financial means to be able to live the life that I want or that I want for my family to help my mom retire. So I blame the system. Why is the system doing this to educators, to people of color, etc.? But it is easy to blame the system, but no one ever succeeded because of blame. It is much easier to change your own position, where you work, what field you work, than to change the whole system. The system needs to change, but sometimes it's not your fight right now. There's more important things to fight for.
I love that. Okay. You guys know I come out of higher ed, so I resonate with what you just said. There is this idea out there within education. I don't think higher ed is the only educational space that exists. I think we're seeing it, especially with our K-12 as well. And oh man, you are taught that you are not in it for money. You are in it because you care, and you keep doing it because you care, and you take on more work and you take on more responsibility. And when you're front lines, meaning you're the one working directly with students, it's even worse in some cases because your attachment to the students and wanting them to succeed and recognizing the good work that you are doing, that's what keeps you tied into higher ed until you yourself have an experience, and it could be anything, where you recognize there has to be more to this. There has to be something else. And for those who are listening who are in higher education and love it, awesome. That's amazing. This isn't, we're not making a blanket statement here, but there's also research out there that shows that the turnover in specifically student affairs, which is where you and I came out of, so not professors, not actual teachers within higher ed, but the other side of the house, student affairs, the turnover there is insane. Like, I think people leave the field within 5 years. The majority of them leave the field within 5 years. And it's some of what you're talking about. It's that burnout factor and the fact that you can't live, you don't make enough money to pay your bills and live in whatever city that you're in. And it's awful. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for people to recognize if you're not getting what you need in your current position, in your current industry, in your current company, and you're literally trying to fight the system of it, it's not worth it at this point, because what if you could get out and do something else and fight the system another way?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one more point. It could probably touch in on one of your other questions as well, but I'm going to share one more kind of nugget for people who are looking to one thing that really helped me in my career transition. And thanks so much for your thoughts there, Julia. The third thing that I want to share is when you have decided, once you pass the hardest part, which is that mindset, right? Then once you make the decision, then you have to run with it. And you have to run with it consistently. And it's called the law of attraction, where you have to share with your dream. You have to share your dream with the world. And you have to start rebranding yourself completely, from your resume, how you introduce yourself at networking events, your cover letter, your LinkedIn, everything. So once you say, I want to become a diversity inclusion program manager at tech industry or whatever role you want to be, then you go out there. I was going out to networking events and I would pick up the mic and say, hi, I'm Jade Chan, and I want to become a diversity inclusion leader in tech. And people wanted to help me because I shared my dream with the world. And people would introduce themselves to me, or I would walk up to a leader at Amazon, at Microsoft, at Zillow, and just introduce myself and share. And they said, hey, I want to help you get there. Let's do an informational interview. Give me your resume, etc. So you can't do that right now in person, but you can still do that virtually or on LinkedIn. So you have to completely rebrand yourself online and in person.
Yes, I love that bit of advice, because that aligns with what I'm sharing all the time.
Absolutely.
So I hope you guys are listening to what she is saying. And I think with LinkedIn, one of the tips that I like to give people is your LinkedIn should reflect where you want to go in your career. Not necessarily where you've been. Now, there are some people out there who are using LinkedIn for sales purposes for their position, and that's totally different. So if you're one of those people, and your company is paying for you to have premium to do outreach and stuff like that, that's a different situation that you're in. But if that's not you, you are somebody who is trying to figure out, what is this next thing that I want to do? Once you figure that out, highlight the skills and the projects and the situations on your LinkedIn that are going to support where you're headed. So just because you did something in the past, if it's not supporting where you're going, then I would take it out, because that's part of getting it in your head. I love that you're introducing yourself as where you want to go. I think that is so important. And people forget that because they revert back to what they know. Well, I am currently this thing. I am currently in this position. Okay, great. But is that where you want to go in the future? So, such great tips, Jade. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. And y'all take notes, because Julia just dropped some nuggets in there as well.
Thank you. Okay, so along with continuing to drop knowledge on our listeners, this is an action-packed episode, let me tell you. Okay, what are a few pieces of advice that you have for people trying to advance in their career, and maybe some things that you would have done differently at certain points in your career?
That's a great question. I'm going to start with one tip is you have to block out the naysayers. Like my mentor, Tinsy Taylor, always says, consider the source.
Yes.
There are, and consider the source, including yourself and your own voice. Because sometimes you have that negative voice telling you you can't do it, right?
Yes, that is a huge point that I think a lot of people don't recognize, is sometimes you're your own worst enemy in these situations.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna share about those 2 points of blocking out naysayers. One is, like Julia just said, we can be our own worst enemy sometimes. So we have to watch out about the type of energy that we are holding on to. Are you sick about complaining about how exhausted you are or how underpaid you are? If you are, then stop talking about it. Start talking about what you want to do. I remember my husband called me out because I kept talking about that. And I didn't realize that I was keeping that energy alive, right? I was so sick about talking about how underpaid I was and how exhausted I was from that. And I would share that with anyone that would listen, right? And so once I snapped out of that, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to start telling a different story because people are not attracted to that. And so everywhere I went, I started introducing myself as the D&I leader, and that I wanted to take my education with me into the tech world, into the business world, so I can transform those spaces. I want to take my education with me. So that was blocking out the naysayer in myself and rewiring that. Now, the second part about blocking out naysayers of other people. So a lot of people, including your greatest mentors or advocates, are going to have limits on what they think you can achieve, but it says nothing about you and your future. It says what it says what they think from what they have learned, right? So people kept telling me that I couldn't do it. They told me that I have to put XYZ years in before I can make this income, before I can become a director. I have to get a PhD, put in 2 years here, 5 years here, 10 years here. Then maybe I can make 70K. Then maybe I can become a director. And for me, I was like, ain't nobody got time for that.
Yes.
And I was like, no, this is what I want. I don't see anyone that has made the transition that I have done, or I don't know anyone personally, but you know what? I'm going to go find those people, or I'm going to trailblaze my way there. So you have to release the previous versions of yourself to become the version that you want.
Yes. So trailblazing that. Oh, I was working with a client a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about that because she had a very similar take on, she was not seeing people that looked like her in positions that she wanted. And I said to her, look, you're a trailblazer. You are a trailblazer in this space, in this field. You're the one. You're the one that's going to go and be the one that other people look to. And that moment of, oh, what? Nobody had told her you can be a trailblazer. Imagine, can you imagine what people would do if you sat in front of them and said, you are a trailblazer in your industry? That is mindset shifting 100%. So if you're out there and you're managing people, I think that's a really great management strategy of how do you find something within your people to say you're a trailblazer in this area, or, what is something to really get them connected to what they're doing. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that perspective, because I think it's so important for people to understand that, as well-meaning as mentors are, they are still human and they still have their own lens and their own view. And it might include you. They might have your best interests at heart. But like you said, they're looking at it through their lens. And if their lens is only one industry, only one path,
that's all they know. And so they're going to put their own limits on you. So know that there is no limit. The sky is not the limit. Go for the stars.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I am a huge proponent of mentors, but I am also very cautious. I always tell people be very cautious about how much you invest into somebody's opinion or what they say they can do for you. Because at the end of the day, even if somebody is championing you, you're still the one that has to do the work. You're still the one that is the driving force behind what you want, right?
You are your own best advocate.
Yes.
Because only you are going to fight as hard for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Such a great conversation.
I love this conversation. Okay. So again, I want to keep it going with like actionable tips, and let's talk a little bit about management. So I would love to know, what are some of your tips, like, I don't know, top 3 management tips, either as a manager yourself or as somebody who has been managed by other people? What are some of the things that stick out to you that you want people to know?
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Julia. So I'm going to be sharing about the top management tips for people. So one is, I love being a manager. So I think that one of the most important roles of being a manager is helping cheer someone on, helping them grow. If you have employees that look up to you, that you manage, that is such a huge responsibility. It's one of the best jobs out there. But if you are not interested in developing people, then do not become a manager. That's my one advice.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because not everybody is built to be a manager. And that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. You don't have to be a manager of people. There are other ways that you can become a manager. Thank you for sharing that. I just had to jump in because
of course.
That is so important. And the self-awareness around that is absolutely key.
Absolutely. If you are not sure, though, if you want to become a manager, then try it out, because there's nothing that you can lose from that. And it's great to try it out as early in your career as possible, because you might really enjoy it, but you might also really not. And you don't have to get stuck being a manager. You can try it and find out. And so to go off of that point, to be a manager, you have to love people. You have to love developing them, building a culture, uplifting them. That is one of the most important jobs of being a manager. Uplifting people and telling them, I believe in you, and trying to foster their growth. I also believe that if you are a manager, you need to invest in your employees, and not from the lens that I'm going to invest in them so that they can give to me and help me achieve my goals forever. So a lot of managers, they'll support you if you keep working under them, but then they'll get angry if you want to have a dream of working somewhere else 3 years from now. And I don't believe in that. If you develop employees everywhere you work in a role, you're going to reach a growth cap, right? There's only so much that you can learn from that role. And so as a manager, you also, and an employee, you have to recognize that. Am I at that cap? Is my employee at that cap? And if they are, then I have to help them towards their next step.
Yes. Where were you when I was working? Like, why weren't you my manager?
What are you talking about? Julia was one of my managers in the past. So we had like 2 managers in that organization, but I was very empowered by Julia. So that is a great compliment. Thank you so much.
Because I have had such a toxic background with managers, and this is something that I'm so passionate about helping people work through. When I hear managers like you come in and talk about exactly what you just talked about, which is you have to like people and you have to support them and you have to help them either move up or move on, right? Getting them to understand that and empowering them instead of thinking, I can't lose them or I'm hoarding them, whatever that looks like. I so appreciate that because chances are somebody is listening to this who is in a situation where they think there are no good managers out there. And that's not the case. There are. You just have to understand how to ask the right questions when you're going through an interview process to make sure that you find a manager that fits you and your style. So I so appreciate you sharing how you view management and some of how you treat your people, because I think it's so, so important.
Before we move on to the next question, I wanted to share two more things about management. One is you have to help your manager help you. So if you want a promotion, if you want to learn about XYZ skills, if you want a specific type of project, help your manager help you by having those conversations with them. Say, hey, I was looking at the leveling guidelines for the next level. And I think I'm already doing these things, but I also need to learn these skills. What do you think? What projects can you give me so that I can get to improve those types of skills? So management they're very busy. They're busy trying to manage people, and they have their own projects and goals that they need to reach, right? And so you have to be your own best advocate. I'm going to say something that a lot of women and a lot of people of color and just a lot of employees in general, they are not as comfortable in some cultures to say that vocally. Coming from Asian American background, we tend to want to put in extra hours and want to let our hard work speak for itself. And so we are not as verbose in sharing our wins. And so that's one thing that I'm very cognizant of, and that I try to share not only my wins, but other people's wins. And when I was a manager, I try to help my employees share their wins as well. And then last two things is I want to encourage people to get these two books. One is Managing with Aloha by Rosa Say. And the second is The Making of a Manager by Julie Zuo, who's the former VP of product design at Facebook. These two are incredible books that can help you become a better manager, or if you're just interested in becoming one, get these books.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. I will also link those and put those in the show notes so that people can access them, so you don't have to worry about writing that. Is that your book recommendations for my other questions? You have more? Okay, great. So I'm so passionate about resourcing people. And one of the things when I started this business and this podcast specifically was everybody deserves to have career education in some way, regardless of what level you're at and all of that. That's why I started the podcast initially, and it's why I continue to do it. And so I love sharing these types of resources. And that's why one of my questions is around, what is a book that changed your perspective on your career and life? Because I just feel like there's so much information out there that people don't realize. And I want to make sure that it's available. So unless you had any other management tips, I would love to know what other books are on your recommendation list for our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm going to give a couple, but I won't go into details about them. So is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's awesome. Great.
So there's a lot of great information out there. And these are some of the ones that really helped me change my perspective to live a better life and also to grow my wealth as a young woman of color. So one is Ramit Sethi. He has a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and he comes from humble beginnings. He has a really amazing website and free email list. Definitely get on that. And then second is Million Mile Secrets. I learned how to travel hack growing up, then go on many trips because my family did not have the financial means to. And so I learned how to travel hack, and I paid for over 4 trips to Hawaii and a 5-star hotel in Bali with points through travel hacking. So millionmilesecrets.com.
That's awesome.
And then next is one of the blogs that I follow is My Rich Journey. So it's all about financial independence and retiring early. I know we have a question on that later.
Yes.
It's this amazing Black multicultural couple with 2 kids who retired after starting the FIRE journey after 8, and it just took them 8 years, and they're civil servants.
Wow.
So My Rich Journey website and also their YouTube channel. And then a couple more.
Yes, go share. I love
it. So one of the things of being an ambitious person and a person that exudes love and positivity is you have to keep your mind positive and you have to feed it with good things, right? Your brain and your mind. So follow Darman, Nas Daily, Jay Shetty, and then also Daniel Amen, Oprah, of course. Follow them, their life lessons. They share videos on life lessons. They have podcasts, etc. I love their content, and it's always very enriching to your life. And if you enrich your life, it's going to flow to all areas of your life, including your career. Also, get Tinsy Taylor's book on Terror to Triumph, because she talks about overcoming bullying. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have had an experience with bullying, and she talks about her transformation. And she's my mentor. She just gives amazing advice, and being able to see that representation of a woman of color overcoming all of that and being where she is. She's a red carpet host. She is the assistant director of USC Black Alumni Association. She has her own book, all of that. And lastly, of course, subscribe and follow Julia's Ride the Tide website. I am serious there. So
Thank you.
Julia, I worked with her years ago, and one of the reasons why I chose to work at APU's Center for Career and Calling was because of Julia, because she doesn't know this. I don't think I ever told her this.
No.
But during the interview process and just watching her do like workshops on career advising, I was like, whoa, this person has so much wealth of knowledge and is so ambitious and is able to help other people with these career advancement tips that I was like, I want to learn more about that so that I can help advocate for others. So she has tons of great tips, great templates, etc. So check out her blog and email list.
Thank you. I did not tell her to say that.
She didn't pay me, I swear.
No, she brought that in on her own, but I appreciate that, because I'll be really transparent. The time that you came to work in the office when we were there at the same time was probably one of my lowest points in my career.
Wow.
So to hear that feedback from the outside, because I'm remembering what my mindset and where I was at that time, and it was not good. So to hear that, I think is encouraging to me. That one of my things as a manager, and this was something that I tried really hard to do, I like to be transparent. I like people to understand what I'm going through at a certain level, but I also do not want to burden my staff with my own issues, things that I'm going through. And so I was really cognizant to have that line there, because to me, I was still an authority in that position, and I never wanted to abuse that power. And so I was really clear about keeping certain lines and things like that. And so I really appreciate that you said that, because it means that I was able to stay true to what I wanted to portray at that time, which was, being competent, being strong, and all of that. So thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
appreciate the plug.
And that was a great advice, management advice as well, right?
Yeah. Well, and coming out of higher ed, and I feel like you can probably attest to this, I saw a lot of people, a lot of managers and people at very high levels cross a lot of boundaries that I thought it was just not appropriate, and not in, it sounds worse than I'm making it, but to me,
no, it's real.
Yeah. Okay.
It's real. And I think people can relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I think you can be friendly and you can have a relationship with your manager and with your leaders. But to me, there's also a line there of, of what that looks like. And obviously culture of the organization plays into that and all of that. But I still personally, I hold that boundary. If you're not somebody that does, that's fine. It depends on your style and your organization and what's appropriate and all of that. But for me, that was something that was important, and I always tried to hold to that. So, yeah.
I didn't feel any of that during that time. I was just like, she is so empowering. I do want to point that out, because I think it's important. A lot of times you don't know that someone is struggling, because people who are ambitious and care so much about the world, oftentimes they operate very high productive state.
Yes.
So the whole world does not know what they're going through. But and they're still able to achieve all of these things and help people, yet they're going through so much inside. If anyone is listening and feels that way, then go back to one of the advice that we talked about earlier is, are you tired of the story that you're telling yourself or the story that you're telling others? And how do you reframe that so that you can get yourself to a better place? Because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes, 100%. And I will say there is such thing as high functioning anxiety and high functioning depression. And when we're in roles, like you're saying, where you're tired, where you're drained, where it's constant, where your mindset is
where you're constantly giving.
Yes. Yeah. Constantly giving. And that's real. And for some people, it's a lifelong battle of it. But for other people, it's situational. And I think being able to recognize that was something that when I look back on certain points in my career, I know I had high functioning anxiety then. I had high functioning depression. and I didn't know at the time because I didn't know what that was. So I'm really, oh man, do I love this conversation, because I think just letting people know that these things exist is so important, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right. Someone could be listening and say, hey, I think I might have that. And that's the gift of feedback that we're trying to give here, to look within. And if you think you might have these like high functioning anxiety or depression, and you're a very ambitious person, then go do some self-care, get some help, get some therapy, so that you can get better and to keep feeding your life and your work.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Okay. I think this is a really great segue into one of our last questions, which, as you know, part of my work is all about people and being empowered to control their career and not letting other people dictate where their career is going to go. And based on our interview today, you definitely share that with me. So can you tell me about a time when you felt like you really took control of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to share two examples. One is going to be related to money. I'm not sure if we have a money question.
We do.
Okay.
Have a money
So we have one more question.
We're
Awesome.
going to talk a little bit about fire in a minute, because I think a lot of people don't know what that is. So It's up to you if you want to share now or, in a bit.
I'm just going to drop one advice about a time where I felt I took control of my life, which impacted my career. So I think I spoke a little about these earlier in the career transitions question. However, one point in my career, I had 2 toxic work environments back to back. And I had 2 very toxic work environments. I won't go into details, not holding on to that energy. But because I had that back to back, it was the first time in my life where I said, I don't think I want to work anymore. And I joked and I said to my friend and my husband, can I just be a housewife? And the thing, I'm not downplaying, housewives have to do so many things.
Oh, yeah. And the only reason I'm laughing is because, I mean, if that was the choice that you made, then I would 1,000% support you. But just knowing you, I'm like, oh, that would be really interesting.
Right? Yeah. So I was so exhausted. Like those 2 work situations had broke me down so much that, and you know me, I had worked in over 15 different jobs, right? And those 2 work environments broke me down, and I realized that I was putting too much of my self-worth on work. Because I used to be a workaholic, and I would miss weddings. I would miss celebrations. I would miss spending time with my family because I was working all the time. And I remember, and I think back now in hindsight, where I would be working so much that on the weekends, I would just, my mom would start talking to me, and I'm very good to my mom, but I would say sometimes I would say things like, I work all week. I just want Sunday to myself. I don't want to go out and do things. I just want to relax and not do anything. And you have to protect your energy sometimes, but this wasn't the case. This was me just being a workaholic and brushing off important time that I can't get back now. And there's only 52 Sundays in a year, right? And if you multiply that by 10 years, there's only so many Sundays that you have. So if you think about it from that point, if you ever said no to your partner or a friend or a wedding, a life event because of work, then you've got it wrong. Do not live to work. And that is one of the biggest things that helped me to control of my life and ultimately influenced my career and everything, because I started seeking abundance from life. And that gave me so much more joy. It gave me the chance to look in a mirror and recognize myself because I'm pouring into myself instead of this large entity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, so important. Jade, this is your story. Talking about that is one of the reasons that I have this podcast, that I'm doing this work, because so many times we don't recognize when we're in the middle of it how bad it really is. Mm-hmm. Until we come out of it. And then how much time is wasted because we weren't self-aware at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I hope for people who are listening, if you're listening to Jade's story and resonating with it, with the burnout, with overworking and all of that, it is time to make a change. You have to make a change, like
Mm-hmm.
do something.
You are too young to burn out. Whatever age you are, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 60, you're too young to burn out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. Okay. I think that's a really great segue into our last question, which is actually a bonus question that we put together.
Bonus.
And this, yes, bonus. And this is specifically because there is something that Jade and I share that we are both really passionate about. And I don't talk about it too much in my social media and on the podcast. But if you've been around for a while, you know that financial health is something that I am absolutely an advocate of, because your financial health really impacts your career decisions and your career choices and vice versa. And so I think when you have such a good handle on your finances, then you can make different decisions in your career, and it gives you a better idea of what you need moving forward, or can you leave a position and all of that. So one thing that has come up a couple of times is this idea of FIRE. And I recently learned about this maybe 2 or 3 years ago was when I was introduced to FIRE. And what it means, it's an acronym, and it means financially independent, retire early. And the basic idea around FIRE is that you have enough investments, and that is investments across the board. It's not necessarily just in the market, but investments across the board to be able to not have to work or be work optional. So your
buy back your time.
Yeah, you buy back your time. Your investments are essentially paying for your lifestyle, and you get to decide what that looks like. So I would love to know a little bit about what prompted you to go for FIRE, because you're in the middle of that process right now. And then what are some of the tips that you have for our audience, especially for people who are just hearing about this in this episode, or who have heard about it but don't really know where to start?
Absolutely. I love that we added this question, Julia, because as women, it is so important to talk about money. And a lot of people, they don't want to talk about it. Either they're socialized in their families to not talk about it. They have a very negative relationship with money, or they don't want to share. And we have to be more transparent about money as women so that we can empower more people to have better financial wealth.
Yes. And I want to really quickly touch on something that you actually mentioned earlier in the interview. You talked about generational wealth. And I'll be really transparent. I have generational wealth. I am a white woman, and I am privy to generational wealth. I'm air quoting wealth because it totally depends on how you view that. But I think what I'm starting to see quite a bit is people of color really embracing the idea of FIRE and of generational wealth, and trying to now in this generation, and I would say probably the millennial generation right now, really embracing the FIRE movement and embracing this idea of starting to build generational wealth now for their future generations. So if you are a person of color, if you're a woman of color, there are a ton of people out there who are already doing this. I follow a lot of them.
Yes.
And it is absolutely amazing to watch the choices that they're making and how they view money. And it is completely counterculture to across the board. I mean, across the board counterculture. And I think this is such an important conversation to have. And you're right. We have to start talking about money, because if we don't, then we can't find the equity piece within pay and career and all of that. So.
Absolutely. So like we said, if you don't know about FIRE, we're going to give you a snippet. And after this podcast, you better go ham on the internet to get more information.
Yes.
So I'm gonna add on to what Julia has already shared about FIRE, which stands for financial independence, retire early. So most people believe that they have to wait until they're 65 or even older to retire. This is what's ingrained in mainstream society, right? We see all of our parents working until 65. My mom is 64, she's still working. However, did you know that there's an alternative that you can retire early? And that if you save 30% of your income or whatever percentage, and you make more money, you save more money, and you grow your money, then you can retire early. You can buy back your time and do whatever you want with it. If you want to keep working, you want to start your own business, you want to spend time with your kids, you want to travel, you can do all of that. And the great thing about the FIRE movement is anyone can do it. If you're a civil servant, if you own your own business, if you work as a corporate software engineer, you can FIRE with any of those backgrounds. And so for me, what prompted me to learn about FIRE and to join the FIRE movement and work towards retiring early is because of working in those two toxic work environments. I know now that I went through that experience that put me at the lowest emotional level where I felt like I didn't want to work anymore. It was because it took me to learn about FIRE. And I saw FIRE as a means of being able to buy back my time. I have a very specific vision, and it could change. It could change years from now, but my goal is I want to be able to FIRE and retire early within 10 years.
Woo!
So
ambitious.
Yes, absolutely. And so once you make the decision and the commitment, then you're going to do all types of things. You're going to do whatever it takes to buy back your time, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to leave folks with 2 tips that I think has helped me in my FIRE journey. And again, I'm still early on in that. So one is you have to build your own personal board of directors. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically, there's research that show the 5 people that you talk to the most, they're going to influence what you think your limits are, what your career path is, and even how much you're making. So I am very grateful to have some very amazing people in my life. And these conversations, they make me they give me energy, they give me ideas, they make me believe that I can do XYZ. And you share by giving back as well. So build your own personal board of directors and think about who is in your life and who are you investing in and who is investing in you.
And I think I want to add to that.
Yeah.
Because my husband and I are in the middle of, as a couple, finding other couples that are living a similar lifestyle to us, which has been very hard. If you are interested in FIRE, you have to be in community with other people who are doing FIRE, because the mindset
is so different.
Completely different. So you want to try to find that either within your current circle or go out and find other people who are doing it and be in community with them.
Absolutely. So how do you do that? You can go on Facebook. There are FIRE Facebook groups. There's Reddit groups. There's even FIRE for women, FIRE for people over 50. There's all types of FIRE groups and Reddit groups that you can join. And there's probably some local virtual groups. And if there's not, you can start your own. Great point there, Julia.
Yes.
My last advice to people based on this conversation about money is FIRE is also about making more, right? If you are able to make more money, double your income, triple your income, then you can invest that money, you can save that money and retire early, and build that generational wealth. So I'm going to share my results. In my career, I was able to switch fields from education nonprofit to tech or business. And I negotiated and increased my salary by over 200%. So times two, 3 times my previous salary in less than 1 year.
Yes. People, I hope people are hearing that. Are you hearing that? 200%.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible.
Yes,
it is possible. Switching industries.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible.
Taking the skills that you already have and rebranding yourself, refining yourself, finding a new field to contribute and leave a legacy for. Now, my husband was huge. My husband, D. Shane Shaw, shout out. He helped me transform my mindset on this. So he told me that someone who is making 40K per year and someone who is making 100K or 200K per year, there's no difference in how hard they're working. It's the field that they're in. It's how smart they're working. It's finding roles that pay more or industries that pay more.
Right.
So work from an abundance mindset and find out what fields you can take your skills to. Do you have to learn a new skill? Right now, technology is booming. Do you go into a coding academy? Or if coding is not your jam, project management is booming.
Right.
Diversity and inclusion is booming. And there are tons of resources, online education classes, boot camps that can help you get into project management, etc. So that would, if folks are not believing that they can make that leap, you can do it. Yeah. You don't have. I remember when I was changing my money mindset, I was negotiating for a role, and I did my research on Glassdoor, and I knew that these type of roles, I can ask for over 100K. And when I asked the people in my personal board of directors at the time, who had that a limited mindset on what they could make, they told me, they said, Jade, don't ask for 100K. They're gonna turn you away. Ask for 60K. Ask for 70K, and be grateful for that. I was like, thank you for that advice.
But no thank you.
Thank you. Just say thank you and leave it. And I asked for over 100K, and you know what? They said yes. And then I negotiated and asked for more.
Yes. And something else I want to point out too is you're not in a VP role or a C-suite role or anything like that. You're a manager level position. So you're in that middle, mid-career space, and you were able to make that jump and ask for that. And oh man, when you told me that story initially, I mean, my jaw was on the floor, because especially people in higher ed trying to transition out, the idea of making a leap like that, we are so conditioned that it's not going to happen. Like the money mindset that we are given is so negative because of the industry. And I think this is so great because it connects so well with everything that we've been talking about around, you can't change the system. Get out and do something else that's going to allow you to live the life that you want. But you also have to have a vision for that. And you created such a clear vision of what you wanted. And I think that helps fuel what choices you make in your career moving forward.
Absolutely. You have to be very clear on what type of impact you want to make, how much you want to make, and how you want your life to look like. And I mean, I'm still a process in development, right? you can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time.
Yes.
And that vision is going to get clearer as you work towards that, as you build your personal board of directors and as you transform yourself.
Yes, yes. Jade, thank you so, so much for being on the podcast. The tips in this episode, I don't even know if I have enough space to to write them all down. There are so many. I so appreciate you taking the time to come in and share your story and be so open and transparent with people. Where can people connect with you best? Is LinkedIn the way to go if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So if people want to connect with me, the best way is to connect by email.
Okay.
So, and also LinkedIn. So it's jadechanspeaks@gmail.com. Hire me. I am a motivational speaker and leadership trainer. And also, so you can find me on LinkedIn or at my email, and Julia will share that information. Thank you for that plug.
Yes. So I will have that all in the show notes and the blog post for this episode. And again, thank you so much. I'm so excited for our listeners to hear this episode and take away some really great actionable tips, because we definitely had a lot, and we will see you next time.
See you all next time. Thank you.